I want you to take a look at this image. Consider this something of an after-action report on our efforts to put out the truth about this desecration of Harriet Tubman's memory that the white media is putting on right now. Before we get to the good about it, let's go ahead and deal with the hard, cold numbers, because that's what Professor Black Truth does. Now, first of all, the projected opening, because the Sunday numbers have not come in yet, haven't even gotten to the evening showings of this racist porn, and it is pornographic indeed. They're projecting it could be about $12 million for opening weekend. Now, as I had written on Twitter, what these guys were hoping for was that they were going to have between 15 and 20 million for opening weekend. They were hoping to get as close to 20 million as possible for something of this nature. Now, I'm sure you can see some of the details that I underlined, and we will get to the internals of the audience demographics in a minute. But before we do, there's something else that I want you to see, because this is about hopefully educating you on what it is that we are going to do as the Black empowerment sphere. Defeating white supremacy is going to be a long-term project, even under the best of circumstances. Spoiler, these are not the best of circumstances that we're under. It's the worst of circumstances. But these are the cards we're dealt. This is the corner that we're in, and we're going to fight our way out of it. But before anybody, and we usually have the usual group of whiners and wailers who like to show up and say, oh, black folks can't get it together. Why white supremacy? And I don't want to hear that crap. Because what happens is these are the people who suffer from chronic mood swings. These goofballs who, as soon as they see Kamala Harris getting that business, they're over the moon. But as with any war, you're going to have your good days and your bad days. You're going to have the days where you gain some ground, and you're going to have some days where the bastards don't budge a single inch. This is a war, and a war is a marathon, not a sprint. You don't beat white supremacy by tanking a movie like Harriet in and of itself. That is okay as far as a step goes. It's okay because it helps to gauge mind share. And it also helps because you understand that the white media, the propaganda arm of white supremacy, forwards its social engineering through the use of lying images and fraudulent narratives. And it's good to be able to show that you can shut down their propaganda offensives, but you're not going to win them all. That does not absolve you of the responsibility, however, to fight as many as you are able to. White supremacy has an enormous head start. They've got gargantuan, massive resources, and they happen to have a core group who are on code. We do not have a head start. We're the ones who are in the back of the freaking field. We do not have massive resources. Well, let me rephrase that. As an aggregate, we represent tens of billions of dollars, but the problem happens to be, well, in too many cases, we seem to have better things to spend the money on. Apparently, survival doesn't seem to make it into our budget, personal or as a group. These are the things that we are attempting to change. This is the reason why, when I started this effort over a decade ago, I said that our mission was going to be to take control of the social discourse within the Black community. That what we were going to do was to make sure that we focused our people in the right direction. Again, this process is going to take time, and that's the true tragedy. Time is against us. The bad guys know this, so they're pushing forward. They have to. Their position is nowhere near as strong as they've made it out to be, but the problem is, at current, it's stronger than ours. Whether or not white supremacy gets toppled is not going to be the work of a single day, but it is also not going to be the work of being something simple and easy either. When you're up against odds this great, against an enemy this well-funded, this well-organized, and this deeply entrenched, you're going to have to come at that bastard with everything you got. Are we currently doing that? Or do we think that Black empowerment is something for weekend warriors? We kind of do Black empowerment whenever the next Black person gets gunned down in cold blood by the police. Or whenever the next outrage happens against a black child at the hands of white supremacy, and then what we're basically looking for is for the black media to speak to our anger, and then, well, we're going to leave it for the new voices of black media to do that heavy lifting stuff. Have you ever noticed how the right-wingers never sit back and think that Sean Hannity is going to be doing the heavy lifting for them? Hell, they didn't even sit there and think that Roger Ailes was going to be doing the heavy lifting. As far as they were concerned, these guys, their job is to keep the home fires burning. But they did not comprise any sort of leadership for white supremacy. Hell, they didn't even comprise the leadership of the right wing. What they did was they expressed the values of the reactionary right. But it was other people, many at the grassroots, who were doing that work. And what happened was you had everybody pushing together. Now, of course, circumstances differ greatly between the white right and the right blacks, I should say. That's a pun, by the way. It's not a political statement. But that doesn't mean that we are not going to do the work. And it doesn't mean that everyone is not going to be required to put in their effort. You can't sit on your hands and think that somebody else is going to topple white supremacy for you. This fight is not going to go that way. Now, before we go any farther, let's go ahead and do a little bit of comparative analyses. Harriet was put out by Focus Features. And I guess Focus Features figures that they're going to be the white media branch that tries to monopolize the black mind at the multiplex. Because last year, Focus Features also put out the Spike Lee movie Black Klansman. Now, if you look at how the rollout for Black Klansman went last year, you understand how white supremacy stacks the deck for things that it wants the public to see, and it also cuts off at the knees other things that it would prefer the public not see, or they try to find a way to cripple it or otherwise undermine it. Black Klansman, opening weekend, 1,500 theaters. It did have its widest release at 1,900 theaters, but that didn't last very long. But think about that, 1,500 theaters just last year. Meanwhile, if you look on Twitter, you see where I explained that Harriet, a very first weekend in release, over 2,000 theaters. That's 25% more than what they did for Spike Lee. You're going to tell me that Cassie Lemmons is somehow a more celebrated director than Spike Lee? Nobody even knows who the hell that heifer is. You're going to tell me that a Spike Lee movie is somehow going to garner nowhere near as big a release as some anonymous movie with some bucktooth foreigner calling herself playing Harriet Tubman? No, what that means is white supremacy is showing you that they can turn their fiction into your reality. They have the resources to just arbitrarily decide to pick and choose winners. And this is one of the main tactics and strategies that white supremacy employs. They use their economy for the sake of choosing the winners and losers. Okay, we couldn't stop you from bringing Black Klansmen to theaters, but we can limit how many theaters it gets into. And Harriet does not deserve anywhere near what it's getting, but we decide how many theaters it's going to be seen in, and we've decided it's going to be seen in over 2,000 of them. That's white supremacy stacking the deck. That's white supremacy choosing winners and losers. Now, I have posted on Twitter about what the demographic breakdown was for Harriet from its Thursday night preview screening, and you had a majority white audience. And I also explained to you that the white media was going to be trying to figure out how to put a pretty face on all this, and eventually trying to say that the movie had more support than it actually had. Now what the white media is saying is, oh, we projected it's going to be 12 million, and hey, wouldn't you know, look at this. You have a majority of black women who apparently are behind this movie. Now, family, this is something that we're going to have to come to terms with. We have got to come to terms with the fact that it's going to be far more important what we are doing amongst ourselves, the discipline that we are showing amongst ourselves as a group. We cannot control what it is that white supremacy's foot soldiers in the society do. The beneficiaries of white supremacy are not under our control, but we do have some ability to start exerting influence over those within the black community and getting people on code. Now, whether or not Harriet's actually going to make a legit 12 million, I don't know. And truth be told, that's beside the point. Because truth be told, we could not stop The Blind Side, which was just more white savior crap. We couldn't stop that from making money. We could not stop other pathetic works from making money that run us into the ground. It's not a matter of, if we can somehow dampen support for Harriet, then what that means is we've stopped the white media. No, it's a matter of showing that we can exercise control over where we put our dollars. Now, yes, we have dampened support for Harriet. And I think that in the weeks to come, the numbers for Harriet are going to be revealed to not the opening weekend, not as strong as the white media is trying to make it out to be. But what I'm trying to get across to you is there is no reason in the world why black people at all should have seen this. No black people should have spent any money on this at all. Yes, we are at the beginning stages. We are nowhere near hitting on all cylinders when it comes to disciplining black people on where to spend their dollars, especially when it comes to the entertainment that they choose to consume. We're in the early days yet, so I don't want anyone coming up to me with the usual caterwauling and whining about how, oh, woe is us, and oh, it's just all a failure. People like that I block, because if you're not an agent for white supremacy, you're damn sure talking like one. Whether or not Harriet gets crushed on opening weekend, that's immaterial. Where the hell are we going to be 2 to 5 years from now in our efforts? That's what matters. 10 years ago, the idea of crushing a presidential candidate wasn't even a glimmer in anyone's eye. We showed Kamala Harris we could do it. This is a long-term project. There are going to be your good days and going to be your bad days. And you got to make sure that you understand when you're gaining ground as opposed to when you haven't gained any at all. There are actually some white media outlets that have been forced to report on the fact that there's been backlash against Cynthia Erivo. Now, the white media, since they have the ability to choose winners and losers, that's what they're doing with their economy, don't expect them to just dump Cynthia Erivo in the trash. As far as they're concerned, they're going to try to figure out, is there any more mileage they can get out of her, if for no other reason than to be spiteful towards us. They're willing to spend money on that. That's how you get crap like Bob Loves whatever. That stupid, pathetic little blackface show put on by Gina Yashir. The white media has no problem with that because as far as they're concerned, that's a drop in the bucket. You look at the untold trillions that white supremacy has at its command, burning $12 million to make a Harriet caricature. It's like with Russell Simmons. You notice how there have been a lot of these white supremacists and their associates who have been attacking Harriet Tubman? And what was it that Russell Simmons did? He decided that he was going to make Harriet Tubman into a bedwench. He was going to make Harriet Tubman into some sort of demonic, demented sexual plaything for white men. And you see that that's exactly what this Cassie Lemmons, Cynthia Erivo, and Debra Martin Chase did. There's this effort to try to make sure that we run black historical figures into the ground, to defame them, to degrade them. And of course, because black people, there's always this idea that black people are good for sex and nothing else. You got this slave owner. And the movie tries to portray that the only reason that a white man would have any dealings with a black woman is for gutter sex. That's it. And you got black people who the white powers that be have given some money to, and they've sold their souls and decided that they are going to engage in the worst defaming of our icons. Now, according to Deadline, it was females who made up some 62% of the audience. We know that they're talking mostly about black people. And that half of the moviegoers were African Americans. Now, since we were not the ones who compiled this data, we can take it with a pinch of salt. But this much is known. This movie apparently was able to get some sort of high rankings on Rotten Tomatoes, but the truth of the matter is Rotten Tomatoes has been review bombed and also review boosted from different quarters. So as far as that goes, again, Rotten Tomatoes might be something that gets buzz on the internet. It certainly gets people talking. How much of a leading indicator it is, I'm not entirely sure of. But it's certainly a place that you can have some fun with review bombing. Not to say that Professor Truth has ever engaged in that kind of activity, mind you. But according to Deadline, Harriet's best markets were on the East Coast. And haven't the new voices of black media been telling you that we've been having big problems out of those East Coast cities? Jason Black said that some of the biggest problems that he had were trying to get support in places like Baltimore, places like DC. Now, New York showed support, but some of those East Coast cities, some of those places out there in the Midwest, Northeast, they've been problematic. Apparently, you got black folks who think they got better things to do with their time than survival. But it disgusts me, but does not surprise me that places like Atlanta and Chicago would actually support trash like this. It disgusts me, but it doesn't surprise me. And as for Los Angeles, well, there ain't many black folks in Los Angeles. I guess that must be where the Caucasian demographic came from. But then it goes on to say that African American women ranked this tripe 90%, definite recommended. African American women. Now, sisters, this is where the conversation is going to get a little bit deep here. You see, I went to read the rest of Deadline's little article, and no less than Debra Martin Chase, we knew that she'd be crawling out of whatever toilet she's been in. She said, "This is not a slave movie." Well, we can all agree on that. This damn sure is not a slave movie. It's a Negro bedwench fantasy. It's the kind of garbage that Shonda Rhimes puts on. I guess this is what happened to the whole Scandal crowd. All of those aspiring swirlers who were no longer able to get their Olivia Pope fix. As far as they were concerned, oh, Harriet Tubman, well, any port in a storm. I guess for them, they liked the idea of a black woman being the chained up ersatz sexual slave for a white man. I suppose after 50 Shades of Grey, just about any sort of perversion is in these days. And it really doesn't matter who is the object of that perversion. You can use one of our beloved ancestors, one of our saints. You can use her as a vehicle for your raunchy, degenerate sexual fantasies. That's what's going on here. That's what I'm understanding this to be, because that's where this stuff comes from. Let's be honest about this. There has been this contingent of wannabe bedwenches who, as far as they're concerned, doesn't matter if it's Dylan Roof or some slave master, long as it's a white supremacist who is showing some sort of sexual interest in a black woman. To them, they want to live out some sick, vicarious fantasy through that. And apparently there is no amount of abuse, there is no amount of violence, there is no amount of degradation that they're not willing to put up with in pursuit of their zaddy fetish. And if the multiplex shows them that the black man is seen as the enemy in all this, well, that makes it even better. That's the cherry on top. That's a sweetener for them. Now, I'm not going to say all, but the problem is too dang many. It just goes to show we have a long way to go. And a large part of that is going to be forwarding truthful images to combat the white supremacy media's lying images. It is not enough to simply call out this garbage. At some point, we got to mount a substantive counteroffensive, and that counteroffensive takes the form of our own truthful images and our own righteous narratives. That's where this is going. That's why it matters that you support what the new voices of black media do. I posted on Twitter the other day, Tariq is trying to get together the funding for a foundational Black American convention. Why? Because you got some of the biggest corporations on earth, and I detailed for you who they are: PepsiCo, AT&T, Mars. I mean, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars a year that these guys generate. And they decided to give old Puff Daddy, they decided to give him a couple of shekels, or rather they told him, you be the Negro who's going to get in front of this and say that this is your production and you're going to sell black folks on this, and we're going to tell black folks that they just need to go and vote. We need to get black people off that whole reparations thing. We need to get them stop talking about tangibles. Instead, we're going to have them speaking in the most vague of terms. Get them just speaking, just mush mouth. Don't be specific, and damn sure don't say anything about tangibles. Don't get into specifics. Just say economic development. What the hell does that even mean? It's a nothing term. It means nothing. $20 trillion check. Now that means something. That's specific. And the white media is starting to crack and cave on that. Some of y'all have talked about this new HBO show, Watchmen. What it means is what we've been talking about here has been permeating the zeitgeist. White supremacy doesn't have the ability to stop it, so they're trying to redefine all this, redirect all of this. Well, we're not turning back and we're not going to turn away either. But when you got people like Debra Martin Chase crowing about this movie, this is a movie that runs black women into the ground, but Debra Martin Chase doesn't consider herself to be a black woman. That's how you get somebody who's asinine enough to say this is a movie that says we cannot control the circumstances into which we are born, but we can control what we do once we get here. You may not be able to control the circumstances that you're born into, but you can control the circumstances that your children are born into. That doesn't come up. How the hell do you have a movie about Harriet Tubman, the quintessential slave who breaks her own chains and then goes to break the chains of the other slaves? How can you have something like that that takes place in the midst of slavery and you got Deborah Chase saying this is not a slave movie? I told you that's what people like her are doing. They're looking for a white audience. And the white audience are not white moviegoers. The white audience are the white supremacist movie executives and television studio executives. That's who Deborah Chase's audience really is, because that's who she's depending on to bankroll her next project or to give her a check or to give her some sort of livelihood. That's who she's trying to win the favor of. And she is desecrating and she is absolutely vilifying our ancestors in order to do that. White supremacy is using Debra Chase, or rather Debra Chase is eagerly collaborating with white supremacy. Now I know what it is that incentivizes a Debra Chase or a Cynthia Erivo. They are the devil's handmaidens. What I want to know is, what the hell is the excuse of these black folks? If you go anywhere near a theater that's showing Harriet, I expect you to be there to protest it. I expect you to show up there to try to dissuade people from going in. That's what I expect you to do. But there are some black folks who want to live vicariously either through athletes and actors and entertainers. They want to be trying to live through people who they see on TV. And they're not interested in actually being empowered. They're just interested in having their brains put to sleep so that white supremacy doesn't hurt quite so bad. Give me some digital toys to play with, some diversions, something to get my mind off the fact that white supremacy's got me in a prison. We're not going to try to break out of prison. We're not going to try to bring the prison down. We're just going to try to figure out if we can make our peace with being prisoners. Too many black people are consuming a steady diet of white media fare. And this is what white media does to you. It gets you to say it's okay to take one of our most hallowed historical figures and one of our greatest ancestors and turn her into nothing more than a wannabe bedwench for a slave master. You can take her and turn her into the object of affection of a slave owner, and well, that's okay. And what about the black man in all this? Well, the black man is the bad guy. He's the real enemy here. Harriet Tubman, this is a woman who could not take care of herself. She needed a white man to protect her. Protect her from what? All these racist white men out here? No, to protect her from the black man. This black bounty hunter, why, this is the real bad guy, and well, it was Bubba the slave owner who was really the nice guy here. Yeah, he's kind of rough around the edges, but he gets nice once you get to know him. This is satanic what this movie's about. We do not have any control over whether or not this movie oversamples with white audiences. It's right up their alley. It's the kind of thing that they would love to see because it's the kind of garbage that says, oh, these slave owners, your white ancestors, they weren't so bad. But with black folks, on the other hand, what this just goes to show is we got our work cut out for us, but that's okay. We're big boys and girls over here. We got big arms, big chests, and big backs, and we can carry the load. We're going to have to because there's nobody else to do it. We have committed to this course of action. And we are not turning back and we're not turning away. We're going to stay the course. Now, while you are disgusted with all of this, I expect the revulsion to be high, but I also expect for this to act as fuel for you because the truth of the matter is we made it where this movie could have been a hell of a lot more profitable. That's not meant to be some sort of psychological consolation prize. What I'm telling you is, even with our meager resources, even being nothing more than some angry, ranting voices online, what's happening is we're being heard. The white media had to mention the fact that this movie was getting all sorts of pushback and this movie was getting all sorts of backlash and where it was coming from and who it was coming from. What that meant is we as an aggregate are speaking loud enough to be heard. And they know that this is going to get louder still. This is what we're able to do with no resources whatsoever. Sooner or later, we're going to have to start putting our money where our mouths are. And if not now, then when? And if not here, then where? What subject, what would make you comfortable to go ahead and decide, you know what, this is what we're going to start putting funding behind. If you're not at this point committed to this, then what is it you're going to want to see? Yes, I understand that even under the worst of circumstances, there are some people who they never stir themselves enough to actually do something tangible for the change that they want to bring about. They always want somebody else to do that. But that's not who the B1 Brigade is. That's not who this Black empowerment sphere is. We are not here for the people who want to be spectators. We are here for the doers. I think that what's happened is, if you look at it in holistic terms, we did not have the ability to stop this Harriet garbage from being made. The white media was dedicated to this, and there's going to be more stuff. Don't worry. If you're sitting here thinking, oh man, if we had a second shot at, don't worry, there'll be some more garbage coming along after this. The white media is already trying to spin this as being a big win, when the truth is they simply were able to stave off an utter collapse. But the white media is going to be trying to mount some more garbage. You had the creators of Game of Thrones. They wanted to do a story about what if the Confederacy had won the Civil War. And the only thing that stopped that from happening was the fact that those two goofballs apparently found a contract with Disney. Disney said, you want to make a Star Wars movie? They were like, oh, forget about the Confederacies. Let's go get some of that Star Wars money. I hear that they've since been dropped from that project. But the point is, there'll be more garbage coming down the pike soon. There's going to be more opportunities to go ahead and crush these guys. But we got to be dedicated to that. It is not okay when black people, especially, well, let's be bluntly honest about this, when black women think that it's okay to play footsie with these bedwench fantasies. When black people are like, oh, I'm not seeing no movie unless there's a white man who wants to snuggle up with a black woman, then I'll go see that. When that kind of garbage is what galvanizes you to go to the movie theater, there's a serious problem there. There's a detrimental problem there. And it's one that cannot be ignored and cannot be swept under the rug and is not going to be glossed over. We're taking it on head on. This is not okay. This is the epitome of what Dr. Claude Anderson called inappropriate behavior. But we already understand that for a lot of us, there's a hell of a lot of cognitive dissonance, a hell of a lot of schizophrenia going on. Got a lot of black people who they got no problem railing against the white media when the white media is slapping them directly in the face. But if the white media sprinkles a little sugar on it, because the white media spent a long time feeding and otherwise nurturing black people's dysfunctions, especially when it comes to sexual politics. Dr. John Henry Clark talked about that. For thousands of years, invaders and conquerors have understood the value of sexual politics to find a way to deceive and confuse you with what goes on in the bedroom. See, that white supremacist, he's got no problem whatsoever having sex with a black woman and then in the morning saying that I'm going to sell your child at a slave auction. That's what Thomas Jefferson did to Sally Hemings. He had no problem raping her for 30 years, and when he had children by her, he said, take some of the little brats and sell them at a slave auction. That actually happened. He did that. So that white supremacist, he has no problem whatsoever having sex with you and then ordering you or your children to be imprisoned, sold into slavery, or killed as soon as he gets out of bed. He's got no problem with that. So you may be thinking that because this white supremacist will lay up with you, that apparently he likes you. That means that, oh, you just got him. You got his mind so spun around. Oh, you just wrapped your legs around him. And certainly that means something. And that's something that women in particular need to get over. This idea that you think that you're doing something so spectacular in the bedroom that these men folk just cannot get over it. unless you got some wannabe bedbuck, or unless you've got some white liberal whose family hasn't pulled the reins on him. Sorry, but that ain't the way it works. That ain't the way it goes. And the same thing goes for these men. Please do not think that you showed Becky such a good time in the sack that apparently she's going to be black first. That you're looking for something that has not happened. It is not going to happen. Now, black people are confused about that. Everyone else is crystal clear. They understand sexual politics. And the white media understands sexual politics. They have weaponized your codependence. They have weaponized your desperation to be desired by your oppressors. They know that that's what you want. You want to be desired by the very people who are abusing and put you in chains and degraded you. You want to be desired by them. The white media knows that. And if they see that you're susceptible to that kind of deranged mentality, they'll go ahead and feed that. And the sweetest part about it is they'll get you to pay for the pleasure of being continually mentally deranged. The white media has monetized your oppression. They found a way to get you to finance your own degradation. And haven't I always told you that whenever it comes to any group of people who are oppressed, there is always a strong element of complicity that goes along with it. That's the only way that you can hold people in bondage for the long term. You got to get them to become collaborators in their own subjugation. And what do you call it when you have some black women who look at Harriet Tubman? Harriet Tubman is your freaking ancestor. You are, at least on the surface, the living image of Harriet Tubman. And yet you would actually pay money so that you can see Harriet Tubman being the object of desire of a white supremacist slave owner. And you get a kinky thrill that, oh, white massa shot this black man. Well, we can live happily ever after. Because that's what's going on in your mind, and the white media knows that. The white media understands that full well. Keep going on playing footsie with these white supremacists. Go ahead and keep doing that mess. Because what's going to happen is you're going to wind up just like Stacey Dash did. And the rest of these clowns who wind up with white supremacy, when they get tired of seeing you and they've gotten as much usefulness out of you as they think they can get, then it's time to go ahead and do the other part that white supremacy loves, and that is to humiliate the mark that they intend to kick out the door. They can't just kick you out the door. They got to kick you out the door nasty. They got to do it in a way that humiliates you completely. That's where this ends. So go ahead and keep staying as close to these white supremacists as possible. That'll make it far easier for them to go ahead and give you the really hellish abuse, some horrifying act of degradation right before they kick you out the door. And the last thing that you'll hear as they're throwing you out is the sound of raucous laughter and that dumb nigger so-and-so. But regardless, let's not, before I go too far, and I think I might have put a little bit too much emphasis on some things. Let's not go kidding ourselves that the white media was going to employ any other narrative than this one. You remember that movie Moonlight came out a few years ago? And it was basically nothing more than an advertisement it was basically a recruitment piece for the LGBT lifestyle among black men. It was basically saying, black men, there's no excuse for why you shouldn't be gay. If you're not gay, there's something wrong with you. And that's what Moonlight was really about. That's what it was all about. Now, I don't know if Mahershala Ali, or however his name is pronounced, he was like the father in that movie. And I don't even remember what it was about because I didn't see it. I'm going mostly off of what I remember. And I'm sure that people will correct me in the comments section and say, Professor Truth, you were dead wrong. Well, whatever role he was in, I think he was a father to the gay kid or something, to the main character. And a lot of you probably thought, well, maybe that's as far as it'll go because Mahershala Ali's, his star is on the rise. Well, you saw what happened in Green Book now, didn't you? In Green Book, he played a straight up homosexual, complete with bathhouse scene. It was always going to go there. It was not going to go anywhere else. But the reason that I bring up Moonlight is Moonlight's another example of the white media deciding to pick and choose who the winners and losers are. Now, Moonlight was being discussed practically before its debut being discussed as a Oscar-winning piece, and this is certainly going to be an Oscar contender, and they just kept banging that drum. The white media was preparing the people's minds for this movie that only made about 65 million worldwide. Now you compare that, on the other hand, to BlacKkKlansman, which made nearly 100 million worldwide. And yet the white media was constantly banging the drum of Oscar contender, Oscar contender, Oscar contender, Oscar contender. They did not do that for BlacKkKlansman. For BlacKkKlansman, it was simply a matter of, well, hey, there's a Kylo Ren from Star Wars. Oh, looks like he's got a little bit of acting range. And that's basically the most that they were willing to say about BlacKkKlansman. Awards, nah, we're not trying to hold this thing up as having any artistic integrity. Not a movie that's talking about infiltrating the Klan, because you really don't want a bad idea like that to get glamorized. I've been speaking for the last few years about the necessity for black people, black men in particular, to develop our own intelligence gathering operations, private intelligence. Well, that's exactly what you saw with BlacKkKlansman. The idea of you got to be able to get information about your enemy. Monitoring him is good. Infiltration is better. But the white media understood that. They were like, okay, Spike, you're getting a little bit, Spike, this is just one of those times, Spike, when you're not making much sense, And that's what's that's the reaction that the white media had to BlacKkKlansman. But Moonlight, on the other hand, they didn't care that nobody really cared to see this movie. As far as they were concerned, we're going to make this a thing. And more importantly than that, we're going to heap all sorts of awards and praise on this movie. We need people to understand this is the direction that black filmmakers need to go. Hey, if you're a black filmmaker looking to get the white media to heap accolades on you, and you're looking to coast to the Academy Awards on Easy Street, are you looking for a guaranteed way to get a best Oscar? To get some sort of Oscar, get some sort of little gold statuette of a white person, if that's what you're looking for, well, this is what you're going to have to do. So I don't want you thinking that even if we had been completely and thoroughly successful at not merely dampening support for Harriet, if we were able to crush this movie, that would not have stopped the white media from deciding, at the very least, we got to give this thing a big push come awards ceremony. Hey, look, we did manage to have a big impact on Leaving Neverland. That thing has been not merely discredited, but disproven. But the white media is still trying to give this thing awards. They're still trying to prop it up. Now, that's nothing more than a distraction from the white males in media who actually have been engaged in all sorts of horrifying sexual depravity and sexual predation. But when it comes to Harriet, on the other hand, this is going to be just the thin end of the wedge if they can. I think that we did good in terms of what was brought against Harriet. I think that we did very good from our end. But this just goes to show that as much progress as we've managed to make with our meager resources, we're going to have to do more. And the truth of the matter is we can do a hell of a lot more. There is a hell of a lot more that we can do to get the word out, to get our people on code, not merely to call this crap out when it happens, but also to counter-program. That's what the next step is. We can go on basically playing the game of being the perpetual targets of the Cassie Lemmons and the Debra Chases and the Cynthia Erivos and the Tyler Perrys. We can go ahead with the white media's black stooges running our hallowed ancestors into the ground without much in terms of response from us, or we get serious about what we're going to do. We can complain about the revolt summits, or we can start making it clear that we are going to start reaching the people with our own. We can play whack-a-mole with Cynthia Erivo and Gina Yashir and Cassie Lemmons, or we can start to promote our interest by promoting our own images, ones that we came up with, ones that are meant to honor and edify us. Because I'll tell you right now, if you think that it sucks to have, even at this late date, to have people who should clearly be able to understand Harriet for what it was. I mean, yes, there are a lot of simple-minded black folks among us. Unfortunately, they rank in the majority. But it is also true that there's a lot of black folks who basically like to give a shrug and is it really that serious when it comes time to push back against the white media? There's a lot of black folks who have made a habit out of that. Now, these are people who are not going to take us anywhere, and they're not going to be around because white supremacy always deals with its tools in the end. My question is, what is our response going to be? Yes, at this point, when we have not reached the most important critical tipping point of all. We've reached a number of tipping points already, but the most important tipping point happens to be the economic tipping point, and that's what this is all about. But part of that economic tipping point, in fact, the foundation of it is going to be getting our people on code as a group. That's the reason why you keep hearing me say phrases like an economy with an ideology, dollars with an agenda. That's what it comes down to. When it comes to your wallet, that wallet is supposed to be a convent. Only the pure of heart are supposed to be able to get into it. Hey, you gonna go see this Harriet movie? Hell no. I do not give my money to anything that is less than pure. At this late date, we can't afford it. It is not okay to make excuses for why you think it's a victimless crime to go see crap like this. It is not okay. Now, at this point, what we do is we get ready for the next time Cynthia or Revo decides she's going to pull a stunt like this. And yeah, I've heard that apparently the white media is already thinking we're going to have her play Aretha Franklin next. Do not expect much support from your black churches. Your black churches are nothing more than open air whorehouses for whatever pulpit pimp happens to be running it. It's the grassroots that are going to stand up for black empowerment. It's the grassroots who's going to put white supremacy on notice. That means you and me. So go ahead and take a look at this garbage. As far as Harriet goes, it wouldn't matter in the aggregate one way or the other, because even if Focus Pictures looked and said, oh man, the backlash against Harriet is so great, we're going to pull this thing from theaters. Okay, that would be a good day, but this is a war. You don't win a war in a single day. This is the way that it is. There are going to be good days and there are going to be bad ones. Now, in this case, this day was so-so. It was less than successful. But we are going to have to learn the lesson of when you have a good day, don't go getting crazy patting yourself on the back. And when you have a day that does not live up to your expectations, if you have a bad day, you don't fly the flag of surrender and say, well, I guess we're done. No, we're not done until we win. We have got what it takes because our biggest sin has been that we've been consistently inconsistent. Black folks are always eager to be able to kick up their heels or otherwise walk away from the field of battle after the first successful skirmish. We're always looking for an excuse to walk away. Forget it. We're digging in our heels. We're making our stand, and we're not walking away from anything. We're going to be overrunning the enemy. We're not looking for an excuse to try to say, oh, well, we've won. Okay, back to Xbox. No, forget all that. We're sick and tired of being the butt of the joke. We're sick and tired of everybody thinking that our ancestors are fair game for whoever wants to run them into the ground and desecrate them. You would never find any white producers putting out any sort of material that takes George Washington or Thomas Jefferson and makes them into black men's slaves. You would never have them do that even as a parody. They wouldn't. But when it comes to Harriet Tubman, you saw that garbage that Russell Simmons did. He thought that it was funny. This is supposed to be an allegedly black man, though I hate to have to say man. Ain't nothing manly about him. And he decides that he would be the thin end of the wedge. He was going to be the tip of the spear on that one. That's where that garbage about trying to make Harriet Tubman into a bedwench got started. And what does Russell Simmons do? He spent practically his entire adult life trying to make himself as useful to the white media as possible. Now he's made his peace with running our ancestors into the ground. He would not dare do that with white people's ancestors. You would never see him doing that with them. He wouldn't take Betsy Ross and turn her into a black man's sexual plaything. He would never do that. He wouldn't have a situation, he would never put on any sort of show or any production where Thomas Jefferson is raping Sally Hemings. Meanwhile, Martha Jefferson is running off to the slave quarters to have some quality time with Cleophas. He wouldn't have it where these white people's icons are turned into playthings for black folks in any shape, form, or fashion. He wouldn't do that. He knows better than that. The white powers that be have already made sure he understands this whole thing about desecrating racial icons, taking people and just lampooning them. That only goes one way. We only do that with black people's ancestors, and you better not think about doing it with white ones. Otherwise, you'll suddenly find yourself disinvited from all of those cheese and croissant parties you like to go to. Yeah, the white media's black bootlicks, they understand exactly what side their bread's buttered on, and they love having it slathered by white supremacy. You got to understand this thing the way that it is. This is in terms of warfare, because this is a war. If Harriet was yanked from theaters by Focus, we would not immediately raise the flag of victory and say, white supremacy is finally vanquished. It don't work like that. We would continue along our course, and the opposite is also true. If Harriet had gone on to make $50 million opening weekend, I'll be damned if I'm going to declare defeat, raise the white flag, and say, well, I guess we're done. Crushing white supremacy is a work in progress. White supremacy did not arise overnight. It's damn sure not going to be toppled overnight, certainly not with people with the meager resources, or rather with the meager organization that we have. When it comes to fighting white supremacy, our enemy, as H. Rap Brown said, doesn't have us outnumbered per se, but they do have us out-organized. And it is where we spend our time in the real world and where we spend our dollars that we prove where our organization is at. That's how we demonstrate our organization and focus. You see, it's real easy to do the rah-rah stuff online and to cheer on the new voices of black media online. That's very easy to do. But to become a real street soldier and burn up that shoe leather, to knock on a lot of doors, to confront the enemies of the black community to their faces, to do what Jamie and Fowler did, and to do what Chad Boogie did when he confronted Gina Yashire right there when she thought that nobody was going to be there. He proved that no, black empowerment is right here in your face. That's hard to do. And that's the kind of nerve, that's the level of involvement that we're going to be requiring. Because I can tell you right now, you get out there doing something that the Jews don't like, they're not going to be limiting their opposition merely to some postings online in a comment section. They're not going to be stopping there. What's going to happen is you go to the airport, there they are. You decide that you're going to be going to the job, there they are. If they find out where your economic interests are at, there they are. In other words, they make it a point that when you decide that you're going to be threatening their interests, when you decide that you're going to be disrespecting them, then what's going to happen is you never know when the next person's going to show up right there in your face. And the reason why is they're serious about their interests. They're serious about what they want. That's the reason why, for some of you who didn't get it, why I kept mentioning and kept harping on the formation of the Mossad for so long. Because they had made up their minds that they absolutely must have that piece of real estate in the Middle East. And they were not going to be taking no for an answer, and they were not going to allow their fellow Jews to say, well, we've put up with oppression this long, what's a few more 100 years? No, I'm afraid that when it comes to empowerment, there are some issues that are simply too important, too crucial, and truth be told, too misunderstood by the group to be left up to some sort of plebiscite, some sort of group vote. Because the truth of the matter is, too many black people have resigned themselves to being human sheep. And the only thing that a sheep is good for is either grazing idly in the fields and not accomplishing anything, or to wind up as lamb chops on somebody's plate. This is the fate that too many black people have chosen, and they will be left to it. But for those of us who've decided that our ancestors fought for us to be more than just cannon fodder, to be more than just sheep to be slaughtered, we understand that we're going to have to roll up our sleeves, that we have not yet even begun to fight. The war to crush white supremacy hasn't even really engaged in earnest yet. We're still having a few skirmishes. Okay, we're still having a couple of minor fisticuffs. We haven't even begun to hurt these bastards yet, but we will. We haven't even begun to inflict damage on white supremacy yet, but we will. And the only thing that this Harriet movie proves is that there's going to be a whole lot of black folks who are going to be fighting on the side of white supremacy. Not that we didn't know that, but white supremacy is showing, yeah, we're coming after your ancestors. We're coming after their legacy. We're coming after slavery. This is a bank shot that they're doing here. They're trying to redefine slavery. Oh, slavery. The slaves lived lives of quiet dignity. And well, the slave masters, they actually liked the slaves. Why, your ancestors were not being just ruthlessly brutalized. Those slave masters, why, they loved many of those slaves. Thomas Jefferson loved Sally Hemings, you know. Well, you might think it was rape, but it was actually love. He loved her so much, he wouldn't let her leave. And as for Harriet Tubman, her slave master, he loved her. Why, he even saved her life. Sure, we're making it up and we just fictionalize that on screen. It's a total lie, but you know, we'd like you to believe it. And there are a lot of black people who don't even have anything to do with that crap show movie who would gladly play along, right along with it. So we got our work cut out for us, but that's nothing that we didn't already know. And the people who want to do the old, oh, woe is us and we is defeated, go ahead and do it. I'll be watching the comments section. You'll be the first ones who get blocked. Let this stand as a lesson to us that we have to intensify our efforts and step up our efforts. The next phase that we are going to be going into, the next phase that we require is activity in the real world, in the offline world. That's what's going to be coming next. That's the next step. The next step is to show that we are able to manifest ourselves in the real world, in offline space. Because this is how white supremacy is getting and keeping black people in the habit of supporting all sorts of denigration of their own freaking ancestors. This is how white supremacy gets black people into the habit of funding their own oppression in the offline world. That's how they're doing it. That's what the freaking revolting summit was about. You can't be just online saying that that old Jim Crow Biden's a good guy. We got to get out and vote now. We got to get out and vote because the truth of the matter is white supremacy understands the psychology of subjugation. We do not think our way to proper action. We act our way to proper thinking. White supremacy understands that. The question is, when are black people going to get serious about it?